Hi, peeps. You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and author of 4 baking books, including Snackable Bakes. Each Saturday, I hang out with the sweetest bakers around and take a deep dive into their signature bakes. My guest today is Hyoju Park. Hyoju, or Ju, as she's known to her friends, is the celebrated pastry chef and co-owner of Madeleine de Proust Pâtisserie and Creative Studio in Melbourne, Australia. Her bakery specializes in Madeleine, the small French sponge cakes with a shell-like shape. But Ju is especially creative when it comes to look, texture, and flavor. She trained in London and worked at renowned restaurants across the world, including Mingles in Seoul, Korea, The Langham in London, and Attica in Melbourne. Recently, Ju was in France, where she received La Liste's Pastry Talent of the Year award. And earlier this year, she released her first cookbook, Madeleine, Simple Bakes for Every Mood, with her co-author and business partner, Rong Yao Soh. The book is filled with beautiful recipes, ranging from Earl Grey and French toast Madeleine to matcha red bean mochi, lemon meringue, and black truffle Madeleine. Ju joins me to talk about the book and the bakery and where she first made Madeleine. Spoiler alert, in her after-school baking class when she was 14. Then she walks me through the pink carnation Madeleine recipe from her book. I loved learning about the inspiration for this Madeleine, her mom, and all of the delicious components that go into making this tiny masterpiece. You are going to love my chat with Ju, so stay tuned. You can find today's recipe at cherrybombe.substack.com. The new issue of Cherry Bombe magazine is here. The theme is Game Changers, and we have 5 different covers featuring 7 superstars who have changed the game in a major way. The issue celebrates the visionaries, innovators, and changemakers who are reshaping the worlds of food, drink, and hospitality. To get your copy today or check out our list of retailers, visit cherrybombe.com or the link in our show notes. Let's chat with today's guest. Ju, so excited to have you on She's My Cherry Pie and to chat Madeleine with you and so much more.
Hi, Jessie.
We're going to start today talking about your earliest actual baking memory. So not necessarily something that you ate that was baked, but something that you actually baked. And I love this so much. I think that memory has to do with Madeleine. Is that correct?
It is. My first memory of baking Madeleine was when I was 14. It was an extracurriculum class at school. And I love the baking, but at the time there's not much class. So I applied the baking class, and the first product that we baked was the Madeleine. And then when it comes out, the smell, I just fall in love with it.
Was that actually the first thing you ever baked, or just the first time you ever baked Madeleine?
I think that was the first time baked with the oven, because at the time I baked with a rice cooker. I baked a cake to make the sponge cake, but with the rice cooker. But yeah, I think that was the first time baking properly with the oven.
I love that. And I know that you were very proud when you brought them home. What did your parents think? What did your brother think? What did your sister think?
They were like, you baked these? Because obviously it was my first trial. And we are sharing with the tea. I think it was with the coffee. Yeah, they really love it. Yeah.
And what about a very early memory of yours of eating something sweet or something baked? I know that your dad used to come home with bags full of snacks like chocolate pies and cookies and Ghana chocolate bars. Tell us about an early memory of eating something sweet.
In my memory, I can't really remember when was it exactly that I was eating the sweet at first, but I always eating the sweet, and then I loved a chocolate, bread, cake. When I was young, on my birthday, I asked them I want to have a whole cake and I want to finish everything by myself, because I have 3 siblings, and then always we are sharing, and I feel like in early my mind, it was not enough.
I love that. I love that. I also read that there might have been like a sweet corn sandwich ice cream when you were little that you ate that actually inspired one of the Madeleine that's on the menu now. Tell us about that.
In Korea, we have like a Gangwon-do, place called Gangwon-do. They are famous with the sweet corn during winter time. So sometimes we go holiday to that area and then we always eat the steamed sweet corn. And then one day the ice cream company make the ice cream with the sweet corn flavor. And then inside there's a sweet corn as well. And then when I had it, it's like, oh my God, they are genius. And they're so delicious, sweet, and there's a corn flavor. And then I feel like, this is a perfect dessert. And now we turned my memory into the Madeleine. So when we opened, we had the popping corn Madeleine. We tried to put every aspect of the corn. So in the base, it's like a honey Madeleine base with the brown butter. And the inside, there's cream cheese with cooked corn, buttercream. And then we make the popcorn ganache. And so we mix with a bit of like a buttercream to able to pipe. And then we pipe the corn kernel one by one. And then we found the corn chocolate. So we make the corn chocolate sort of like a green color a little bit. So we express the leaf of the corn. So the shape just looks like a corn.
I love that. I saw pictures of it. It's so beautiful. And it's in the book, which we will talk about. Tell me a little bit about your family in terms of sweets and food and eating and cooking. I know that you have always had a really big sweet tooth. What about your family? Were they also sweets lovers? And did your mom and dad cook? Did everyone love food? What was the vibe?
I didn't realize our family eat a little bit sweeter than other family until I grew up. I think my mom always say, little bit of sugar for the food make extra delicious. And then my dad always, when he come back from the work, sometimes like when they have gathering with the colleague, they came back with the full of snack bags and then we all having together at night. My sister, now she's a really big dessert lover. So she always like find the new dessert place. And then when I was in Korea, we go together and then she has a really, I would say she's a kind of like a foodie as well. My brother is, I think he eat everything.
I eat everything too. Was there food TV? Like, were you watching cooking shows? Were you reading cookbooks when you were growing up? I think I read that when you were little, you might have seen pastry chefs actually making Madeleine on TV. Is that correct?
Yes. So I was a big fan of soap opera in Korea when I was young. I love watching it. And then one day there was a romance drama, but the actress job was the pastry chef. The drama shows how to make the Madeleine, how to make cake. And then actually that was the first time that I really see how to make it. That looks so cool. And then I feel like, oh, I want to be a pastry chef after I saw that.
I love that not only did you make the Madeleine in your after-school baking class in school, but you also saw it on TV in your soap operas. It's so great.
I was lucky.
When I was reading about this experience, I think maybe on the show they called the hump on the Madeleine sexy. And you didn't totally understand what that meant or why a hump should be sexy, but it planted the seed for you actually becoming a pastry chef.
Yes. At that time, I couldn't understand why they express it like that. And then after I grew up, after I learned what is a Madeleine and then what is special part of the Madeleine, I realized, that's why they call it like a glamorous and they're like a sexy. Now, if I see it, yes, when it comes out with a big belly and they're like a clean shell, I feel like, oh, yes, this is a sexy.
This is a sexy hump.
It is.
If you love our show, did you know that we publish a free baking newsletter every Saturday to correspond with each new episode? Check out Cherry Bomb Substack to subscribe to our She's My Cherry Pie newsletter today, where you'll get exclusive insights about my guests on the show, their recipes, and other fun baking news and tips. Plus, check out our other free newsletters, where you'll find the latest food and fashion news and browse through our recipe catalog, which is filled with some really great recipes. While you're there, consider becoming a paid Substack subscriber to get access to exclusive content from Cherry Bomb Magazine. invites to our monthly Bomb Squad meetings with industry pros and discounts to events like our annual Jubilee Conference. A subscription is just $6 per month or $55 a year. Learn more at cherrybomb.substack.com or click the link in our show notes. So when you first went to university, you studied English literature, which your parents really wanted for you because they had a plan for you, and the plan did not involve you being a baker or pastry chef. And then at some point, you had a part-time job in a kitchen, maybe when you finished with university and you sort of fell in love with restaurants and baking and pastry and cooking. Tell us about that job.
Actually, I didn't enter the university. So in Korea, when we turn like a 19 years old, there's like a biggest exam to enter the university. So I kind of like got the accept letter from the 3 different university. It was the English literature and sort of like a teaching. So it's all from the really good universities. And then after that, we kind of like have some break time a little bit until we enter the university. And there was time I had my first part-time job in my life. At first, I was like a waitress. And then 1 week later, when I look at the kitchen, they look so fun. And then one day, the head chef said, "Oh, do you want to try to work in the kitchen?" And I said, "Yes." So I tried to work, and I feel like, oh my God, this is like full of endorphin every day. Oh my God, this is the job that I need to do the rest of my life. I love being in the kitchen. One day I come back home and then I talk to my parents and I want to do the cooking. And then they say, obviously they say, nope, you need to go to the uni as we plan and as you plan. And then I said, if I don't do this job, I think I'll regret. And then in some point of my life, I'm going to go back because I know how stubborn I am. And then I know what I like and then what I want. It was quite lucky that I realized what I like and then what I want in the early stage of my life. Because I feel like 19 years is still very young considered, but I know that I want to do that. And then I talked to my parents, okay, let's do this. I'll try to work 1 year and then prove that my passion is not going to be changed that easily. And then I want to do what I like to do. And then obviously they say no, but I'm stubborn enough to carry on what I like to do. So I worked 1 year. It wasn't easy because all of my friends was the fresher at uni and they enjoy their life after like being an adult. But I was working 12 hours in the kitchen. And then when I go back home after the work, I always call with my bestie and life is so tough. But I do enjoy it. And then every morning I get back to the kitchen and then after 1 year later, they approve and then they realize my passion is real and they were happy to support my dreams. So I was lucky enough to go to UK and then study.
You met Rong, who is your partner and also the co-owner of your patisserie, Madeleine de Proust. And you guys met in school, but then you went back to Korea. You felt like you understood French patisserie at this point, but you also wanted to understand sort of Korean desserts from your home. Ended up in Melbourne in Australia and reconnected with Rong. And you decided that you two would go into business together. I understand that you thought maybe, well, Korean patisserie, that's what we'll do. Rong, the genius, said no. I love this expression, like a single product strategy. Can you tell us a little bit about Rong and about his idea to do a business that did one thing really well?
I would say Rong is the person, he's good at everything. That's the feeling that I got when I saw him. He's so good at cooking. After he become interested in the pastry, he tried to master the pastry as well. And then he was able to do. And I feel like, wow, this guy is like amazing. And then he even good at the business subject as well. I feel like for me, my talent is in one side, like a cooking or baking, but he's good at everything. And then he's very smart as well. Yeah, after we finished the study, we went back to our own country. And then I was working in the Korean Michelin restaurant, and then learn about what is a Korean dessert. And then for him, he went back to Malaysia. He's from Malaysia. And then he tried to help family business. And then at that time, he kind of like learned more about like a business. When we decided to go to Melbourne and then we met And then we work in the restaurant. And then in some point, we decide to do our own business because we are too ambitious. We feel like we need to conquer the Melbourne. Yeah. And then he said, okay, we need to be a little bit smart. And then at that time, people expected to see the dedication toward the one product. So like a loon croissant. Loon from the cake become really popular, and then we feel like we also need to do the single product to have more competitive point from the customer point. There's a chef called Kate. She opened the Loon Bakery. They are really popular because they do the croissant and then they do variation from the croissant. And then we feel like, okay, we need to do the single product that can vary with the one item. And then we were talking about the name, and then one day the Madeleine de Proust come out. So Madeleine de Proust is a meaning of nostalgia in French. So we want to play around with the Madeleine. And then I got the mission, okay, so I'm gonna conquer the Madeleine. And then we're gonna do every different way of Madeleine. We're gonna show to the people. Yeah, that's how it comes out.
There's a famous scene in Proust's In Search of Lost Time. Because of this scene in his book, now Madeleines are associated with memory and nostalgia and childhood. Can you describe the scene for us?
The interesting thing is I haven't read that exactly, but I know one day character smelled the Madeleine and then he remembered the nostalgia, memory, and the feeling through that smell and the Madeleine. That's why they call it Madeleine de Proust as a nostalgia memory.
Yeah, I love that. I think the character is dipping the Madeleine in some tea, and then he takes a bite and he's just, transported, I guess, back to childhood or back to a specific memory. It's such a beautiful idea of yours and Rong's to make a bakery about Madeleine, because I know that with all of your Madeleine, you infuse them with your memories and you give them flavors and personalities of things that are meaningful to you guys. It's such a beautiful way to present pastry. I know when Rong first started making Madeleine, during COVID actually, he was using Japanese molds, which are very special, yes? And I think you wrote in your book, the Madeleine tasted like butter and a cloud had a baby.
It is. The mold that we use from the Chiyoda, I think they are the original company who make the Madeleine mold. And then when we bake it, we use the really light Japanese flour. It's like a cake flour, but it has like a really low protein percentage. So it doesn't foam the gluten too much. So it's very light. And then when it just comes out, because we want to also capture by the eyes as well. So we try to make the belly really big, like sexy. How I remember the Madeleine. Yeah. So we make it really big belly. So when it just come out, it's like a very fluffy and then light. And then so when I touch it, it's more like a baby bot.
And when you first did a pop-up, before you opened your brick-and-mortar patisserie, you had 8 different flavors of Madeleine with 8 different batters. And I think all of the ordering was just coming from Instagram back then. Are any of those flavors still on the menu today?
Yes, we still have quite a lot in menu, like a chocolate. Actually, we change the menu every month, what we are offering, because we have a lot of repeated customers, so we don't want they get bored. So we sometimes this menu from the a previous time, people love it. During winter, we bring the gingerbread cookie. We kind of rotate the menu because I created a lot for 3 years. So some people miss the flavor, so we bring back. And then some of recipe like a yuzu, chocolate, pandan. I think a lot of recipes still we are using it.
You ended up opening Madeleine de Proust. The Madeleines are like a blank canvas where you play with flavor and texture and fillings. I think you say this in your book, it's a nostalgia-led design of the shop and the Madeleine, which is this idea of nostalgia being the driver. I think there's a mugwort recipe that reminds you of your grandmother.
Yes.
Yeah, and then the corn, which reminds you of that ice cream when you were little.
Yes. I think this is a thing. I love the eating dessert, and then that memory just motivate me a lot than any other thing.
So I understand that when you go to the bakery or the patisserie, you always have fresh Madeleine so people can try something, that's warm. And then you also have your filled ones that are a little bit more complex with more components. So people can sort of have a chance to try warm and simple and then a little bit more involved.
It is. So we are the Madeleine focus shop. So we want to let people try a lot of aspect of Madeleines because some people, they don't know what is Madeleine and they just, oh, the shop looks pretty. Oh, what is this? And they just come in and they, oh, so this is a Madeleine and there is a traditional French in between cookie and the cake. Inside is like a little bit fluffy. Outside is a bit hard. So traditional way you warmed up and then you're having it. So if you haven't tried Madeleine, why don't you try with the fresh bake? So we can warm up and then they can experience the classic way of Madeleine. And then when they happy with it, they want to buy some more and then bring back home. A lot of our customer become like a regular customer. I would say like a 60% of our customer, they are the repeated customer. So they come back and then they try the another flavor. Today, I feel like a little bit more simple. They go for the like a Hyoju chocolate without the filling. Or someday I want to give it as a present. They want to go for a little bit more like with the filling, more pretty one, more the flavor they haven't tried. So we want to give some options what they can choose because we are the Madeleine specialized shop.
I want to talk about your beautiful book, Madeleine. It's dedicated to your mom. And the Madeleine we're going to talk about is also inspired by your mom. I love that in the book, for many of the recipes, you have sort of the simple section, like here is this Madeleine, you can make it simply. And here is this Madeleine, if you're feeling confident, you can do something a bit more sophisticated. Was that your idea to put that in the book, or was that your editor or Rong? It seems like such a great way of presenting the recipes.
I think we lucky enough to have some authority that we can change around what we want, and then genius Rong, like by the section when we work, he's more like a brain, and then he kind of like lead the direction. And then for me, okay, I think this would be good, and then I kind of like a creating. Because we've been trying like really hard to how we've been discussing how should we separate the section. We want to give this one. So we've been trying quite a good amount of time how we divide the section, and then he come out with it. And then I think it was the really good dividing for the readers.
No, it's very easy to read and very easy to absorb. I love that you say that you wrote the book to explain the decisions behind the Madeleine's sexy hump, the texture, the mold prep, the filling, temperature control, and timing. I thought that was so interesting because the beginning of the book is just how to do everything very generally, and then you go to all of the recipes where it's much more specific. Tell us about that idea to sort of explain your decisions, because I know as a baker and cookbook writer, it's so exciting when you can sort of explain why you did something. Or as a consumer, when you read something and now you understand why, because there's so many things in pastry and baking, we don't know why people want us to do them. We just do them.
Since we opened the shop, we are more understanding about the customer point. At first, when we opened, we thought everyone knows the Madeleine. But in real life, not everyone knows as much as we know. And then some people don't know what is the Madeleine is still. And then that's how we think, okay, we need this book is for everyone, from the kids to the professional. So like a from home baker who doesn't pursue to be perfect. They just want to bake something really delicious and a really nice thing, and then just sharing the family. Or some people who buy the book is like a lot of like a professional like colleague they bought, and then they want to test it. For them, I know they want to make it perfect, and then they want to duplicate exactly what I'm doing it. So we try to make everyone happy. So we give the general explanation. And then if you want to go for a little bit more like a detail, this is a thing you can give it a try. So you can set your goal. That was the thing we want to make everyone happy.
First thing, when thinking about a Madeleine, you think about the mold. And you guys tell us that there are Korean, Japanese, French, standard, silicone. There are lots of different kinds, but you say that if you don't have one, you can make a Madeleine in a muffin tin or a silicone mold or a small baking pan. And then you tell us all the different ways to prepare all the different pans. If you have a brand new steel pan, maybe you just use a teeny bit of grapeseed oil that you rub on. But if your pan is not in good condition, or if you want to extend the pan's life or the mold's life, you tell us to brush with an even layer of softened butter and to dust lightly with bread flour. Can you tell us why we don't use melted butter to brush on the pan and why we want to use bread flour rather than like all-purpose or cake flour?
For the reason why I use a little bit like a softened butter, if the butter is melted too much, they're gonna slide off. So they are not gonna stick on the pan at the top. So the butter need to be a little bit like a solidy, I would say like a soften. So all the surface of the pan, it can buttered. And then the reason why we use the bread flour is the molecular of the bread flour is a little bit bigger than the plain flour. It's not too finely stick, so it comes out a little bit more easier and the cleaner.
Yeah, you say that like the larger particles of the bread flour help the Madeleine release from the pan. I thought that was so interesting, and I wondered if we could be using bread flour in other applications. It might not taste right, but you know how when you make like a bundt cake and you worry that the bundt cake is going to stick, I wonder if something like bread flour would help release your bundt cake.
I think it can help, but at the same time, the color going to be a little bit lighter because there's a layer of flour. Yeah. But for us, it's okay because we can glaze and then...
Yes, you can cover it up. Yeah.
Yes.
And then if we had a silicone mold, we would use an oil spray, like a nonstick cooking spray. Now we're going to talk about the pink carnation Madeleine. Sadly, 3 months after you opened the patisserie, you lost your mom. And this recipe is sort of for her, pink for love and for cancer awareness. And thank you for sharing that story about this recipe in your book, because it makes it so meaningful when you read the recipe. And it is so beautiful, Ju. Oh my gosh, the photographs of this carnation Madeleine are incredible. And you tell us this recipe is more technical, but it's very rewarding. So listeners, get ready for something technical, but rewarding. So this particular recipe we make in a financier pan, not in a Madeleine mold, correct?
Yes, it is. It's an oval financier pan.
And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a yuzu syrup. Tell us why yuzu is a favorite citrus note for you. It has a special importance for you.
Yes. So my grandparents lives in Wando. It's a small island in Korea. It's very southern part located. So it's near with Japan. The climate is perfect for like a citrus. So during winter, they have yuzu. We call it Utah, but not everyone aware when I call it Utah. So I just call it yuzu when I at the like a public. They have a lot of like a yuzu trees. So every winter, when I was young, every winter we make a yuzu chunk, sort of like making the enzyme with the one part of sugar and the one part of fruit. And then we keep it during the winter. And then when we have we feel cold or like a little bit feel like, oh, I'm going to have a flu, then we make a tea with it. So it's sort of like my winter tea. It has like a so beautiful floral aroma along with a quite good amount like the citrusy. So it's perfect tool for the pastry. So it's one of my favorite ingredients when I use it.
I love it as that nostalgia for you of the memory of drinking the tea when you were little, like very Proustian. So we're going to combine some superfine sugar and some yuzu juice in a pan. We'll bring it to a boil, remove from the heat, and we'll cool that. Then we're going to make a lemon yuzu ganache. We're going to heat cream and glucose syrup. Can you tell us why you add glucose syrup to your ganache?
So the role of glucose in the ganache is it gives a shininess and the elastic of the ganache. So when it get cold, it wouldn't like broken. It's more like a pipe really nicely.
It gives it like a flexibility, elasticity. So we'll heat the cream and the glucose syrup until warm. Then we'll pour over some white chocolate. Do you have a favorite brand of chocolate that you like to use?
Ooh, for the chocolate, I'm a big fan of Vahona chocolate. That was my favorite. It's not too sweet. They always like produce the specific flavor of the chocolate. So sometimes like for the white chocolate, I love the Ivoire, which has like a vanilla white chocolate. And then sometimes I like to use Opalis. It's more like a milkier. And if I make something like a milky, I use the opalis chocolate. And then if I want to highlight the vanilla flavor, I use the ivoire.
So we'll pour the cream and the glucose over the white chocolate. We'll emulsify with a spatula. When you say that, do you mean sort of stir to bring the two ingredients together?
Yeah, you need to give like a friction a little bit because if it is like a big amount, we use a hand blender. But at home, the homemaker, they don't make the big batch like how we do. So they need to beat them to make sure they are cooperate well, like an emulsifying.
And you would do that with just a small flexible spatula or a silicone spatula? Okay.
Yeah.
And then we will mix in some lemon juice, some yuzu juice, some unsalted butter. Is the unsalted butter softened when we add it?
Yes, it is. The softened.
I think I read that you like sort of a high-fat butter, like a French butter for your ganache, or maybe in the Madeleine generally.
Yes, the 84%.
Yeah. And then we'll add some citric acid. What does the citric acid do? Just pops the flavor?
Yeah, just like enhance the flavor because if you use too much yuzu or lemon juice, it'll be too liquidy. So it won't set. So sometimes like it needs some either citric acid or ascorbic acid, depending on the flavor that you want. But in this recipe, I want a little bit of kick, so I use the citric acid.
We'll combine until smooth with our spatula. Then we'll cover with plastic wrap and refrigerate until it sets. We don't want it to get too hard, right? Because we want to be able to fill with it. Yes?
Yes, but at least around like a 4 hour would be good because we use the chocolate.
Yep. Then we're going to make some black tea ganache. So we're going to heat some cream and some honey together, and we'll infuse that with some Assam tea. We're making all of these components before we make the Madeleine because making the Madeleine is actually pretty quick, and you want to have all of these components ready for when you brush with syrup when they're still warm. I just want to explain that to the listeners so they understand why we're doing all of this first. So we'll heat some cream and some honey. We'll infuse with some Assam tea for 5 minutes. Then we'll strain to remove the leaves. And then we'll pour all of this over the white chocolate. And again, are we using a spatula to emulsify?
Yep.
And then we're going to add some softened butter. And again, with our spatula, we'll mix together until smooth. And we're going to chill this until it's slightly firm. And for this ganache, because we're going to pipe on top of the Madeleine with it, we're going to make some Swiss meringue buttercream, and we're going to fold the two together. So your buttercream recipe is you heat some whites, some super fine sugar, some salt. Do you ever use kosher salt or is it fine sea salt?
Fine sea salt because we want they are dissolved.
Yep. So we'll add some fine sea salt, and then we're making a double boiler here. But can we put those items into our stand mixer bowl since we're going to use our bowl to make the buttercream? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take our stand mixer bowl, we'll heat our whites, our superfine sugar, our fine sea salt. We'll heat that over another bowl of simmering water, like a double boiler, and we'll be whisking together until about 140 degrees. Can you do it by feel, or does it have to be the actual temperature? You know, sometimes I do that thing where if you can feel it and you don't feel the sugar between your fingers and it feels warm to the touch, then it's good.
I think for me, better check with the probe because the reason why we warm up the eggs is we want to pasteurize it. So when it's like a 62 degree, it kind of like a pasteurized. So Swiss meringue is cooked egg white. So some people, they want to know about it. So that's why we always check with the probe.
Makes sense. Once we reach temperature, we'll take that bowl, we'll put it onto our stand mixer, and we'll put in our whisk attachment, and we'll whisk until it's glossy and cool, stiff peaks. Then we'll reduce to medium, slowly add some softened butter till smooth and fluffy. And we're going to whip together our black tea ganache with our Swiss meringue buttercream until fluffy. And that will be what we're going to pipe on our beautiful carnation to make all the beautiful petals. All righty, now we're going to make our Madeleine. So we're going to heat our oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll prepare our mold. If we're using a steel pan and it's in very good condition, we will just, as I said earlier, we'll just, with a soft tissue, you say, you know, just kind of rub some grapeseed oil on our pan. Or we can do the softened butter and the bread flour. Now we're going to sift some low-protein cake flour with baking powder and fine sea salt. Tell us why we like cake flour in this recipe.
The cake flour has a lower protein than the other flour, so it's more fluffy because the texture that we want is we want light and the fluffy from the Madeleine. That's why we use the cake flour.
Yes, it produces like a soft, delicate crumb, but you still have sort of a crispy outer layer.
Yes, it is.
And you love this brand,
Nissin Violet flour.
and that's Japanese, but maybe you can order it online or it's just so expensive.
I think you can order it from online, or I think Japanese grocery shop, they also sell it because
Oh,
at
that's
first
great.
when we find it, yeah, it was a Japanese grocery shop. And then now we import it from Japan for the directly. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't have Nissin Violet cake flour, you have a great, tip, which is you can replace 10% of the cake flour in your recipe with cornstarch, and that will lower the protein level in your cake flour, and it will sort of be comparable to this Japanese cake flour that you and Rong like.
Yes, it is.
Now we're going to melt some unsalted, high-fat butter and some milk. We're going to melt those together. Is the milk whole milk?
Yeah, it's a whole milk.
A whole milk together in a heat-proof bowl over a pan of simmering water. And we want to keep that temperature at about 104 degrees. And we're going to keep it warm while we make the rest of this recipe, because you explained to us it's not good if the butter mixture is too cold and it's not good if it's too hot. Can you tell us what happens if the butter's cold or if the butter's too hot?
So I'll say making dessert is all about like an emulsifying. So if the butter is too hot, it will cook the eggs. And then if the butter is lower than 40 degrees, it has a chance to like un-emulsify well. So sometimes when the butter is too cold, they already like solidify and then they don't mixing well. That's why like we set the exact temperature so everyone can make the same result.
So now we're going to crack some eggs into a heat-proof bowl, and we're going to blend with a hand mixer. Do we blend just on like a low speed? We're just trying to break up the eggs?
I think just break up the eggs is enough. Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll strain the eggs with a sieve. Why do we have to strain the eggs?
If you just do at home for the small batch for the family, to be honest, this is not that necessarily, because while you are mixing it, it will be already like a loosened. But for the shop, we do the big mass product, and then sometimes there's a string and it's not enough to break it off while it's whisking. So we just want to make sure everything is a same condition. So we crack the eggs, blend it, and then we strain it so every condition can be same.
Now we're going to warm the eggs that we just strained with some superfine sugar. Tell us why we need to warm up the eggs with the sugar.
The reason why we warm up the eggs is we want to dissolve the sugar. So if sugar is not dissolved, it will burst in the oven. So we kind of like dissolve the first with the warm eggs.
I read that it's also good for caramelization and good for like the structure.
It is. It has the structure.
And then we're also going to add some honey. I learned so many interesting things about honey from reading the book. But the honey is an ingredient in all of the Madeleines. Can you tell us why it's important to use honey in your recipes? It makes them very, very moist, right?
Yes,
it helps with the moisture and the flavor and the texture.
It is. By the time pass, the honey kind of like absorb more and more moist, so it can enrich the flavor and the shelf life as well.
Yeah, and I also read that because it's hygroscopic, it can lead to more tenderness in the Madeleine. Will you remind me what hygroscopic means?
Hygroscopic means like it absorbs the water contents.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like make it moist.
And then we'll also add a little bit of lemon zest, and we'll bring this egg mixture to 86 degrees until the sugar dissolves. And there's a reason that we warm the eggs. This natural binder, lecithin, in the eggs helps bind the liquid and the fat in that next step of the recipe we're about to get to. You and Rong have thought of everything. Every single thing is covered. And the warming will ensure that there's an even rise and a smooth batter. So now we're going to whisk the dry ingredients gently into the egg mixture till it's smooth, 1 to 2 minutes. We don't want to go too quickly because if we overmix, we won't have a sexy hump. And we could have a dense crumb, etc. So then we'll mix in the butter mixture just 1/3 at a time. And again, you can tell us why. It has to do with our emulsification, yes?
Yes, because if you pour the butter too much at once, it's hard to emulsify well. So that's why we do gently, like divide into 3 times. So it makes sure the emulsified well, because on the recipe, there's a good amount like eggs and butter as well. So it's kind of like a water and the fat. So we need to make sure they are emulsified well.
Perfect. So now we're going to spoon the batter into a piping bag and then pipe into the molds only about 80% full. You always want to do about 80%. Our temperature is at 450, but we reduce it to 350, and then we bake for about 10 to 13 minutes. And I think we're starting at a high heat and dropping in order to kind of set the shape. Is that right? Right at the beginning?
Yeah, because make sure it's preheated well, and then we preheat it high heat, and then once we add it, we lower down the temperature. So it means like there's not too strong fan at first, but there's a good amount of heat, so it can rise up really gently.
Yeah. You do say that the baking time will differ if you have a steel mold or a silicone mold, but you'll get used to understanding all of that the more you practice. You also make a big deal. I thought this was interesting that some Madeleine recipes do require chilling, but you guys designed your batter so you do not need to chill, which I so appreciate because I like things to be easy and fast, and I like that we don't have to wait. Tell us what you did to your batter so that you don't have to chill it.
While we're testing the Madeleine, I realized everyone say the batter need to be rested because their fat is high to enrich the flavor. That's why everyone just follow it. And then I realized if I rest the dough, the hum is really stable, but it's really small and pointy. And then I want to duplicate that big and fatty hum that I was imagined when I was young. So I feel like, okay, so maybe I'm going to try without like resting. And then we try, and then it's less stable when it rested, but it has like a giant, and then it's so quick, and then I can see the results straight away, and then it's more like a fluffy than the richer. So we had to decide which direction we want to go, and then we want the little bit more lighter and the fluffy. That's why we don't rest it, and then we bake it straight away. But we need to make sure immersion is really good. That's why I always emphasize that immersion is really important, because we don't rest the dough. So make sure eggs and the fat need to be emulsified really well.
We'll remove the Madeleine from the oven. We'll unmold them immediately. We don't want moisture to build up in the pan, and we want to keep them crispy. And then while they're still warm, we'll brush the Madeleine with the yuzu syrup, and then we'll let them cool. Then we're going to make the yuzu glaze right now, because you kind of want to use that right after you assemble it. So we're going to sift some powdered sugar into a bowl. We'll add some yuzu juice, and we'll whisk until smooth. Do we brush the glaze on the hump or on the flat side, or which side, or both sides?
The hump side.
So we'll brush the glaze on the hump side, and then I loved this. It was so interesting. We're going to use a wet pastry brush to brush the glaze. Why should it be wet?
Because we don't want too much glaze on the Madeleine, because if you don't wet the brush absorbs a lot of glaze, and then while you are brushing it, it's so thick layer, and then so many like excess glaze. That's why we brush, and then we kind of like a squeeze, so make sure they are wet.
Then we're going to let it dry, the glaze, and then we're going to fill the Madeleine. So we're going to dig out the core of the Madeleine with a thin, sharp apple corer, and we'll dig from the flat side, and we'll gently twist from left to right and go about 80% in with the corer. Why are we twisting from left to right?
So in front of the apple core, there's a spiky point. If you don't twist, and then if you just push it, it doesn't cut the Madeleine. It will just like push the dough. So it has a chance to break the dough. So if you twist it, the spike gonna work, and then it will kind of like sizzle.
Yeah. We'll gently pull out the plug, and we can use a toothpick if some of the Madeleine stays in the hole. Then we'll fill the hole with the lemon yuzu ganache. It needs sort of to be soft enough to pipe, thick enough to hold its shape.
Yes, it is.
Then we're going to pipe the black tea ganache that we mixed with the Swiss meringue buttercream onto the flat side of the Madeleine. And we'll use a Loyal Petal number 125 nozzle to sort of form this carnation. And then we'll freeze the carnation until fully set. because we're going to enrobe the whole thing in pink chocolate, which is so pretty for your mom. And we want it to be easy to do that. And it will be easier to enrobe it if the carnation is frozen. Yeah, the petals are frozen. So now we'll prepare the pink chocolate enrobage. I will melt the white chocolate, and we're going to melt it with cocoa butter. Why do we melt it with cocoa butter?
White chocolate itself is pretty thick. If you just enrobe it, is the layer going to be too thick, and then it doesn't able to see the beautiful line. So we kind of like add the cocoa butter to give the fluidity. Cocoa butter is like when it melted, it's just like a water. But it will set like a chocolate. So it gives a good amount like a fluidity.
And do you have to order that? You can't find that in the grocery store, right? You have to order that from like a restaurant supply, the cocoa butter?
I order from Varona.
Varona. Perfect. So we'll bring the chocolate and the cocoa butter to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll add pink and purple food coloring powders. I thought that was so interesting. I don't think I've ever seen a powder, except sometimes I will, grind up freeze-dried strawberries or raspberries into a powder to add flavor and color. But tell me about food coloring powder. Maybe I just don't know about it. Maybe all pastry chefs in the United States use it. But is it easy to find?
I think you need to go to the pastry specialized shop.
Yep.
So in Australia, there's a brand called Color Mill. It's an Australian-owned brand, but they have like a lot of different color already mixed with some cocoa butter and the oil. So it's able to change the color of the chocolate. But if it is like a small amount, and then I like to use the strawberry chocolate or other raspberry chocolate. They do with the freeze-dried chocolate with the cocoa butter. So it's already have a color, but that will oxidize the color because it's a fresh thing. But for us, we want to keep the product until customer receive it. So we want to make sure it's not oxidized. So we use the color. Yeah.
Use the powder. And you don't like to use gel food coloring or liquid food coloring because you don't want to add any moisture?
You can use it. It's usable, but just make sure it's an oil-based one. Because some of coloring is for the hydrosoluble, which is melted in the water. And some of color is fat soluble. So it's for the chocolate.
Now we're going to place a piece of styrofoam or a car sponge into a loaf pan, and then we'll stick our Madeleine on skewers and pop those skewers into the styrofoam. Tell us what a car sponge is.
When you go car wash, there's a sponge.
Like a really big sponge. Oh my gosh, I love that. We'll put our Madeleine on long skewers, and then we'll poke the skewers into the sponge, and then we'll take each skewer with a frozen Madeleine on the end, and we'll dip it into the pink chocolate, just using our hand, right? We don't need any tools to do the dipping. No. Yeah. And then we'll let it set in the styrofoam or our car sponge for a few minutes, and then we will transfer that to the freezer until it's totally set.
Yes.
Then once it's set, we'll decorate with some rose gold dusted crunchy pearls and let those set, and then we'll serve. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Ju. And I just want to say that you are my cherry pie.
Thank you so much.
That's it for today's show. Don't forget to follow She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And tell your pals about us. You can find today's recipe at cherrybomb.substack.com. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network. Our producers are Carrie Diamond, Catherine Baker, and Jenna Sadu. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking.